We're public enemy number one, no matter what we've done. When all this happened in Minneapolis, we woke this whole arm of activism inside Albuquerque again. Now it's systemic racism. How did that become a police problem? Our whole profession is being accused of everything, and this didn't even happen in the state of New Mexico. All of a sudden, this is a hot button political issue. It's a necessary evil, right? We have to show and we have to comply with the DOJ consent decree.
On Monday, August 10th, at the New Mexico State Legislature's Criminal Justice Reform Subcommittee, a variety of people came to testify on the issue of police accountability and also on the issues of fines and fees and how they impact the community and whether it is worthwhile to be assessing fines and fees and collecting them. But one of the big highlights was in the second half, in the afternoon session. Albuquerque Police Officer Association President Shaun Willoughby was given time to testify and to give his thoughts from a police perspective of many of the police accountability issues going around, and he had a lot to say. And in fact, he had a lot to say. And then upon answering some questions from State Representative Antonio Momaestas, who was co-chairing the committee hearing that day, Shaun Willoughby basically began to answer his question and then spun himself out into an epic meltdown. And we're going to have clips of that along with our guest, Charles Arasim, who's been following these kinds of matters for years. Before I get to that, though, I would like to also put into the queue a clip that involves not Shaun Willoughby, but one of the other presenters, who is a former president of the Fraternal Order of Police, Bob Martinez.
Unfortunately, in many cases, this is a reality because too many individuals in elected and or appointed positions believe the rhetoric that the police are the aggressor or the problem. But the police are neither the aggressors nor the problem. The police are the protectors of the people from the criminals. Another way to put it, police officers are the sheepdogs protecting the sheep from the wolves.
Sheep. Completely 100% compliant sheep. Is that what the public is? Is that what the public should be? And what happens when one of the sheepdog takes down one of the sheep who are not one of the wolves? Are we as sheep supposed to just meh and take it? Joining me now is Charles Arasim, a photojournalist and a veteran civic watchdog. Charles, thanks you for coming on the Duopoly Report.
Thanks for having me, Steve.
So you watched the testimony of the interim committee on that day live, right?
Yes. Yeah.
We'll go over some of the clips specifically that I want to focus on, but in general, when you were listening to Shaun Willoughby testify and give his reactions to a couple questions, what was the overall demeanor that you felt was coming from the APOA president?
Defensive. He kind of lost his cool. Bottom line, got defensive about the whole thing.
Do you feel like they had an ample opportunity to bring out the information that they wanted to bring out to the legislative committee that day?
Well, it was their first meeting, so I thought it was very informative, and yeah, I thought it was a good start. It was a good start, but as far as everything, oh no, they've got several meetings to go.
I see. Okay, and I guess we'll be looking forward to seeing some more of those meetings as they advance towards January, when they get down to business about passing a bill, right?
Right. We've got another 4 months.
So what I'm gathering, especially from listening to the whole contents, is that that there is a sense, an energy from at least the majority in the legislature that additional police reform measures are on the table for the coming session. That what they did during the special session was not enough. Is that
yeah.
right?
And of course, things have kind of changed since then with the George Floyd incident and everything that's going on in the country, and it's really come to the front burner, so to speak.
All right, I'm going to run some clips from what was said. Between the afternoon session lasted 2.5 hours, and actually the first hour and a half of that was the testimony of Shaun Willoughby and Bob Martinez, from former Fraternal Order of Police president. Of course, we can't cover all of that in this video, but I'm going to hit some of the highlights of some of the statements that were made, especially by Shaun Willoughby, and try to get some framework and reaction from you on that, because I know you've had a lot of experience.
Albuquerque knows a couple of things about reform. As you know, Commissioner Maestas, you've been with us from the very beginning, right? Reform is not easy. Reform has taken this agency 6 years to get to where we are today. I'm proud of where we are today, but we have a lot of work to do.
So, Charles, you've been following APD for a while, and I'm assuming throughout all this reform, the DOJ and everything that's been going on with that, correct?
Yeah.
Would you say that you're proud of the advancement and reform that's been occurring since that time?
No, I wouldn't say that at all.
Uh-huh.
I think that they've dragged their feet as long as they can, and will continue to do so. I believe the CASA, for them to get out from underneath the CASA, they have to be over 95% compliant with all of the stipulations in the CASA for 2 years. And so here we are in what was supposed to be a 4-year reform at roughly year number 6, and they're 2/3 of the way compliant.
What do you think President Willoughby is so proud of at this point?
Well, he sees it from a different point of view. He sees it from all of the work and all of the money that's gone into it, and I can understand his point of view, but he also has to understand the point of view from the outside of what the citizens are seeing, and they're seeing a lot of money going out the door, a lot of their money, tax dollars going out the door, millions and millions. Last time I looked, they're pushing somewhere in the neighborhood of having spent $30 million on this reform. And we're only 2/3 of the way there, and we're 50% 2 years beyond what the public was told they were going to do. So,
all right, and so continuing on here, then next, and I'm only going to have just one or two from the first part, the pre-meltdown section of the Shaun Willoughby testimony. And this next clip is this right here.
Qualified immunity is called qualified immunity. You have to qualify for it. Police officers in my own agency have been held civilly liable outside of qualified immunity for wrongful death suits and have been indemnified by the city. Most officers that lose qualified immunity, and I believe if you did the research, there are quite a few nationally that have acted outside of existing or well-established law or outside of policy and training, that have lost or challengedly lost qualified immunity. And the municipality, more times than none, will come in and indemnify, paying that bill on behalf of the officers. Because I will tell you this, I have police officers right now trying to get divorced from their families so that they can protect themselves financially. I have police officers coming into this office and asking attorneys, what do I need to do to get a trust? How can I legally change my name? How can I prevent myself from doing a job that I love and losing everything that I've worked for? Don't be Colorado. Because as soon as Colorado made the headlines about taking away qualified immunity and cops are liable up to $25,000, what you didn't hear about it within that legislation, if you read it, is that they funded every municipality and county and every officer out of state coffers to have personal liability insurance up to, you guessed it, $25,000. This is a slippery slope. If you impact qualified immunity, what Colorado knew is that if they take away qualified immunity and they allow officers to be physically or financially liable, then they have to provide them personal liability insurance, or Albuquerque's going to hire all their cops. You won't have to defund police departments because we won't exist.
The way things happen is if they get civilly sued, that the city or the county or whatever jurisdiction picks up the tab if the officer loses the case, or they negotiate it. So why would they be so concerned about protecting their personal assets?
Well, because they don't know the law. I mean, that's basic. To me, that's pretty basic, you know. I'm not exactly sure, you know. I suppose, I mean, that something as bad as that could happen. I'm having a very difficult time for them to be going to that extreme, and it's kind of part of the mindset, you know. My observations have been that the politicians and the public employees and stuff, they kind of go extreme, you know. Oh my God, the worst case scenario, you know.
Right. So in part of that, President Willoughby says that in the example of Colorado, who passed a law saying that qualified immunity no longer exists in its whole form. One of the things that they did, though, is they gave insurance policies to all the officers to the tune of $25,000 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So now the state's still footing out for insurance payments on these police officers. If that's so, and I have no reason to question President Willoughby on this. He's up on all of the details. But if that's the case, then why are also droves of Colorado police saying that they're not going to be police officers anymore? I mean, those two facts don't seem to connect.
Well, once again, I think it's because they don't understand what the law that was just passed in Colorado. They are going off on this worst case scenario thing again.
And believe me, I know it's tough to be a police officer. I mean, they deal with the toughest situations that anyone has to deal with, but it just, some of these immediate reactions from the police make me feel like they know that they're going to run afoul, or they fear that they're not, they know that they're not doing things by the book, and have now even more fear of a personal financial injury due to all of this stuff.
Yeah, exactly. It's quite exposing, as to what their mindset is, and when you think about what they're saying and what their mindset must be is because of they got something to hide.
All right, and I'm gonna. This is the only other clip I'm gonna bring up from the first half.
Thank you. And just lastly, if I criticize the running back for the Lobos, nobody accuses me of hating the Lobos. Nobody accuses me of being anti-Lobo. And so my question is, when an officer is criticized, when an agency is criticized, it appears to me that police as a profession and individually get incredibly defensive and feel, and pardon the pun, but they close ranks. And that's the power of police unions, frankly, is you can close ranks much more effectively because you're organized. Do you have any comments on that, President Willoughby? Are cops defensive, or am I just seeing it?
No, I don't believe cops are defensive, and I believe everybody's a little bit defensive, right? I mean, at the end of the day, we're public enemy number one, no matter what we've done.
So no, we're not defensive. I mean, everyone's a little defensive, but we're public enemy number one. Like that seems like a pretty damn defensive answer to me, doesn't it?
Yeah, it sure does. It sure does.
I mean, I think that this is interesting because he's saying that there's this perception that we're public enemy number one, and yet he also cites polls that say that people want more police and are supportive of the police. So, which one is it? It seems like he's just kind of flailing or reacting to what Representative Maestas had to say and almost proving his point.
Yep, and I'll go back to what I said earlier: is that they go worst case scenario. There's no balance here.
Right. So
that's not it. That's not the point.
Extreme reactions to any kind of
extreme reactions to virtually anything.
Right, and that's not all. Like, so in this second part, which is not part of his prepared statement, which he's basically responding to Representative Maestas, he continues with this.
Everything that we've done here nationally, they're all being talked about. We're already doing them in Albuquerque. When this happened, the most frustrating thing for me, when all this happened in Minneapolis, we woke this whole arm of activism inside Albuquerque again, which by large margin were very peacefully protesters. I have no problem with how they conducted themselves, with a couple exceptions here and there. But most of the people that wanted to be a part of the conversation, they didn't even know we had a civilian police oversight agency.
Okay, so I'm going to stop the clip right there. He goes into a list of things, right? But I actually believe that that's true, that most people do not understand that the city of Albuquerque has a civilian police oversight agency. But in my experience, and it's way more limited than yours, the little I've seen from it is it's in a completely toothless and ineffective body that can't get anything done. Am I being extreme when I say that?
Not at all.
Right. So in a way, to me, that makes it so that people won't hear about it because nothing's coming out from it.
Exactly.
What you've on your YouTube site, you've taped, you videoed many of the CPOA meetings, correct?
Correct.
What was here's my one-word answer to some of those that I've watched, but it just looked like a giant cluster, and that it seemed like whatever rules they had to follow ensured that nothing could ever happen, even if they wanted to.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, so then so President Willoughby brings up, well, we got a CPOA, but honestly, we really don't. We just have one that's entitled. But
I think what Willoughby isn't telling anybody, and why is it that so many people don't know we have this civilian police oversight agency? Well, it's, like you said, completely ineffective. And anybody who does know about it and who looked into it a little bit forgot about it because they say it's a waste of time.
So
and they're right. They're right. It is a waste of time.
Yeah, I will encourage my viewers to go to Charles's YouTube page that's linked down below and go search for some of the CPOA labeled videos to see for yourself, because I watched 2 or 3 of those and I wanted to throw a brick through my computer screen. I mean, it was just it was maddening, and in fact, I think even some of the members of the CPOA expressed their frustrations as well. But it was clear that nothing's going on there. Okay, next, in regards to Minneapolis, Willoughby goes off on this one.
Police officers are constantly holding the bag. Now it's systemic racism. How did that become a police problem?
When I heard that, I nearly fell off of my chair.
I did too.
Because really, when we're talking about the institutional racism, we're talking about the institutional racism within police departments.
Right, right.
And it seems like President Willoughby completely let that one go right over his head, probably willfully, to say that it's about everything else. And by the way, there is systematic racism in things other than the police departments. But during a lot of this protest and a lot of this conversation, it is specifically about institutional racism inside police departments.
Police departments, right?
So
and for him to his reaction to all that was crazy. I mean, just what do you mean? What? Oh, this happened in Minneapolis. Why is it now New Mexico's problem? Why is it now our problem?
correct. Yeah, and
this never happened before.
this never happened before. I could not believe it when I heard that. So I think this gives a real clear insight into what we're dealing with here from this angle. I mean, that kind of a denial on that scale gives me very little hope that APD, not only from the sort of the top end of APD, you know, the people that are appointed by the mayor and other things like that, but even amongst the rank and file, that if he's representative of what rank and file think, that reform is going to be next to impossible. All right, and then here's the other bit about this. Now, there was one moment when President Willoughby, I believe, dropped down the walls, got rid of the defense, and it tied on to the end of this, and he relayed something that I think is a good point and is even personal.
It doesn't matter how many clinicians you send to the call to help an individual in crisis. If you don't have a place for them to go to get the necessary long-term help they need, they are not going to benefit the situation. If we don't have enough, does anybody on the panel have a family member that's a drug addict? I do. You know how hard it is to get an actual drug addict who's on the streets and homeless help? Have you been to Matt's? Do you have any idea what that place is? So we have a bunch of political footballs being thrown around here, but nobody's really going to the core issue of how we treat people that are addicted and people that are mentally ill and providing them services. And we're just left holding the bag. We're defensive, we're this, we're that. That's not necessarily true.
You know, actually, this is the one place where I really agree with President Willoughby, that we've had a lack of social services and a lack of places for people to go to get real help for a long, long time. And we've been spending so much of our city budget on the police and not on the services that people within the city need.
Yeah, what percentage of the department's budget is the overall city budget?
I don't remember. I think I heard figures that it could be over in a majority, like 52%, or it's
Right.
a very large amount. And by the way, that is not, we're not an isolated case. That is true in most cities. One thing I saw is that we were spending nearly 100 times more on police department than we were on social workers, like,
Yeah.
for example,
Yeah.
as a line item. And so, like, that alone kind of tells you what's going on. But this was the one moment, and I think that it's interesting that it happened this way, that President Willoughby, I guess, has a personal familial tie to this issue of lack of social services for people who are addicted. And I think he makes a good point here. And it was the one time that I think he stepped out of his role as the APOA president and talked like a regular person, a regular human being experiencing
Right.
life.
Right. Right. And he agrees with everybody that we've got an imbalance in the way our tax dollars are being utilized, and unfortunately, where else is the money going to come from? If a majority of the money that the city has in their budget is being spent on the police department, guess who's going to take the biggest hit?
Right. But, you know, to his point almost earlier, I didn't roll the clip, but that qualified immunity, if they get rid of it in the state, and especially if there's no other protections for police, that you might see, you wouldn't have to do a specific defund the police measure, that the police will defund themselves and will leave. And I'm sitting here going like, well, great, we could take the extra money and shovel it over to social services and maybe permanently help that problem.
I have a feeling that the majority of people who decide to go into the career of being a police officer do it based on their want to really help people. And so I'm going to have to disagree with Mr. Willoughby on officers leaving in droves. I don't think that's necessarily true. Now, they may be saying that.
Right.
Yeah,
As like a scare tactic to try to get legislative bodies not to go there then.
Right, yeah. And you know, here we are, you know, again, you know, the police, you know, think that the legislature is going to some kind of an extreme over here, which maybe they are, I don't know. And so they have to go the other way. And so, you know, it's this, it's always the them against us situation. And I think, I don't believe that at all. I think the general public, the legislators, the lawmakers, the majority of the police officers, the majority of the public officials are all on the same page, that we have definitely got a problem here, and we have got to come to conclude, you know, figure out collectively how we're going to fix this. And it's all of us are going to pay for it. All of us are going to have to pay for it. And so for the police to say, "Oh, you can't do this to us because we're all going to walk away," well, that just doesn't make sense.
Okay, let me just go through. I think we're pretty much done. There's not much left, but I just want to make sure there wasn't some other gem that I missed.
Unions have been involved in politics in this state from the beginning. Hundreds of thousands of dollars have been invested in politics in this state by unions, with the exception of APOA, because we don't invest in politics in that genre. All we do is endorse individuals. We don't provide money. But that's not a problem. That's obviously not a problem. Only when it's police.
You know, that's interesting. The APOA, you know, they do make their endorsements publicly known. And I know that they put out of their own yard signs, sometimes billboard signage. The other thing that President Willoughby didn't mention, and I know this firsthand when I worked in a city council race in 2017, and not for the candidate that got the APOA endorsement, is there were times when on a Saturday or Sunday, police officers showed up to go door knocking for the candidate that was endorsed. So they do put in their labor, and they do put up signs, and they do make very public announcements that usually get carried by the newspapers and the local media in there. So I think he's being. I'm not sure the exact point he's trying to make here.
Well, he's basically being a little disingenuous just because about their political activities, about the union's political activities, simply because they don't give cash.
Right.
So, yeah.
And right, but I'll be the first one to tell you
they have
that,
a lot of influence. They have a lot of influence.
They do, and I think that they're, you know, not only, you know, with police officers and their families and extended families, but people who honor and respect the police many times look to the police officer, the APOA endorsement as a guide for them.
Exactly. As to where they're gonna put their cash.
They're certainly not toothless. And right. Honestly, this is a position of mine that because the police, and it never should have been this way, but to me, they almost have a feeling of being military at this point. And, you know, quite literally, they have purchased and are equipped with military equipment from our U.S. military. And if that's the case, then like the U.S. military, there should never be any endorsement whatsoever by an institution like that. You know, you don't see the U.S. Army endorsing congressional candidates or presidential candidates because it's totally forbidden. Like, it's part of our secular government. And I think until police demilitarize, they should kind of be considered military and be having to abide by the restrictions that military does for federal stuff.
It's a good point. Yeah, it's a good point.
So, I mean, I think they should be almost grateful that they have what they do have, in terms of influence. That was pretty much the highlights. That was right towards the end of his meltdown rant. And in fact, interestingly enough, when that occurred, because that was totally unscripted, I think Bob Martinez came in, the former president of the Fraternal Order of Police, came in and actually said some more words. I think he was actually trying to do some damage control from what President Willoughby did in that meeting. So there you go. You can see how highly charged he is, and I don't think he's alone in different police departments. Do you tell me, Charles? Do you have any other words? Anything I might have missed or that you wanted to cover that I did not?
Well, I think the bottom line of both Mr. Willoughby's performance and Mr. Martinez's statements, the bottom line of both of them were that the problem really isn't with your run-of-the-mill police officer out there doing his job as best he can. And for the most part, the majority of them are doing a hell of a job. It's the leadership in the police departments that are failing. And that was their bottom line. Both of them agreed on that point. And I think you'll find anybody like myself who has, been a watchdog of what's going on here and in other places. I have police officer friends that work in other departments and across the nation, and they say the same thing. They say, our leadership is terrible,
Uh-huh.
and they keep causing these problems. They keep allowing bad officers to remain on the force and not literally just, there's the door,
Right.
And if you want to sue us, and then the other thing that I wanted to say was I wanted to go back to the Civilian Police Oversight Agency and point out that once the DOJ leaves town, they're going to be all we've got, and so I think that the city council needs to sit up and take notice again, as they did a few years ago when we finally got the former agency, which was called the Police Oversight Commission, abolished, and they set up a task force that took roughly a year to come back with recommendations on how to restructure it. And a number of us, voiced our opinions, saying that you're not going far enough, and it's turning out to be, we're right back roughly, 5 years later, right back to where we started as far as the effectiveness of the Civilian Police Oversight Agency. It has no teeth. For instance, they've recently recommended 2 officers be terminated. And the chief of police said, "Nope, not going to do that." And too bad. And there's nothing that can be done. And these officers needed to be terminated. They did some very bad things. And it's going to cost us. It's going to cost every taxpayer in Albuquerque because there's a full-blown investigation going on right now by the state auditor and the attorney general for rampant time card fraud across the department. We don't know where that's going to end. It really hasn't started yet because the city's been ordered by the state auditor to bring in an independent public accountant and take a hard look at the situation. So, how long that can take, it'll probably be another year before we find out what actually has been going on and what it's going to take to fix it. So, like I said, the Civilian Police Oversight Agency is going to be the only thing that people have to keep the reforms intact and going. And I think the city council and the mayor need to possibly form another task force and do a 5-year review, which, oh, by the way, is in the city ordinance that created the CPOA, that they do a review. And I think it was set at 4 years. And so I think it's time that a review be done on how effective it is and where things can be tightened up, and maybe I think that the Civilian Police Oversight Agency should have the final word on disciplinary recommendations, and not the chief of police.
So I think there's some politics going on here a little bit, which is
absolutely.
that
Absolutely.
APOA is pointing at police leadership, and police leadership is appointed by the mayor, right?
Correct.
And so if there's failings at the police leadership level, then ergo, by association, it's the mayor that's failing. And I don't necessarily disagree with that. But I've lived in this town for a long time, through many mayors, and this problem did not begin and end with Mayor Keller. This has been ongoing, and it makes me wonder if every mayor is just fine with this, or if the police have some kind of influence over any of our mayors that we're not completely aware of that's going on here.
Yeah, I think there is a fear factor involved. Absolutely.
So there you go. I mean, it's speculation.
The police can't go on strike. That's against the law. They can't do that.
Right.
Okay. So exactly what mayors are afraid of to really do some cleaning up and straightening up and tightening up of how these departments operate, I really don't know. I've seen a lot of things, and they could fear the safety of their families. Here back just before the district attorney Brandenburg retired or decided not to run again for office, she was threatened when she was going to bring forward
on the James Boyd case. And yes, and then we saw that when she did actually try to actively push a stronger hand in the case of the slaying of James Boyd, that the police initially were kind of making sideways threats at Carrie Brandenburg.
Yeah.
Well, hey, Charles, thank you so much for your time tonight, and giving us all of your expert comment. And like I said below, Charles Arasim has a YouTube channel, all right, and he is almost like a pure videographer, photojournalist. So you're not going to get interviews and back and forth, but what he does is he just parks that camera and shoots what he sees, and you won't believe some of the stuff that he's grabbed over the years that will really enlighten you as to how the inner workings of our city government of Albuquerque works or doesn't work. I would really highly suggest that you take the time to check out some of those videos. It's really helped me in understanding more about the city and state that we live in. Charles, thank you for being on the Duopoly Report.
Thanks a lot, Steve. Appreciate it.
A final note on this whole thing. That was on the afternoon of August the 10th. That later on that day, a news story came out on KRQE about John Ross, the chief of staff of APD, who has now formally been caught misusing the APD credit card that was issued to him. And then a few hours after that, APD shoots and kills one of our civilians in the late night. And not 5 hours later, APD, in the wee hours of the morning of the 11th, shoots and kills a gentleman in his own home, a white male business owner with Second Amendment protection, and he has now been slain as well. So I just thought that was one hell of an accent to the testimony, the highly hyper defensive testimony of Shaun Willoughby. This has been the Duopoly Report. Thanks for listening.